Welcome to Jazz Blues Rhythm Chops. My name is Don Mock, and I'm going to take you through several kinds of rhythm and comping ideas to use in a jazz-style blues progression. We're going to talk about chord voicings, extensions, alterations, and chord movements. And I also have some complete 12-bar rhythm examples for you to learn. Now, although we're focusing in on the jazz blues, all the concepts in this video can be applied to standards and contemporary jazz compositions, as well as other styles of music like funk, blues, pop, and even country. The 12-bar jazz blues is a great vehicle to learn jazz comping because it's a simple chord progression we all recognize. Yet by adding a few substitutes and chord movements, it can be made very complex. The word comp or comping is short for accompaniment, and the ideas I'm going to present here are for comping in a group situation, usually with a drummer and a bass player, maybe a piano player or horn player, or even a vocalist. We'll explore the various roles the guitar can play in a group, from playing simple rhythm backgrounds to playing chord punches like a horn section or even sounding like a piano. And remember, you're going to spend a lot more time playing rhythm than you are soloing, so it's a very important skill to get down. So we got a lot of things to do. Grab your guitar because I'm going to ask you to play along in this video, and I'll give you some notes to tune up. Here we go. Here's my high E string. And the B, and that G, there's the A, and play a G7 chord. The first thing we need to talk about is the blues progression itself, the 12-bar jazz blues. Now, most of the ideas in this video are for a major style blues, meaning that the primary chords are major or dominant sevenths. Now, later on we'll talk a bit about the minor style jazz blues, but for now, let's look at the standard major style blues progression in the key of G. The jazz blues is a bit different than the traditional blues in that it has a few additional chords. Now, it starts out with the 1 chord, G7 for a bar, then it goes right away to the 4 chord, a quick change, to C7 in bar 2, then back to the 1 chord for 2 bars, G7. Then we go to the 4 chord in bars 5 and 6, and then back again to the 1. It's probably the chord that stands out and distinguishes the progression as a jazz blues rather than a traditional blues. This E7 is called a secondary dominant in the key of G. Now, if you're not sure what that means, let me give you a quick lesson on secondary dominance. If you understand your basic diatonic theory, you know that in the key of G, or any key for that matter, the 1 chord is a major 7, the 2 and 3 chords are minor 7s, the 4 is a major 7, the 5 is a dominant 7, the 6 is a minor 7, and a 7 chord is a minor 7 flat 5. The secondary dominant rule says that you can basically change any of the 7 diatonic chords to dominant 7s to help the chords move smoothly or resolve or create a little additional tension. The most common secondary dominants that you'll see in all styles of music are the 2 and 6 chords. In our basic blues progression here, the 1 and the 4 chords are also changed from their original major 7s to dominant 7s. Now, looking back at the chart, there's our 6th chord in E7 in bar 8. Now, this is a secondary dominant, and it started life as a minor 7 chord, the 6th chord in the key of G. We changed it to a dominant 7 to create a stronger resolution to the next chord. And the next chord is the only one in a standard jazz blues that I've given you 2 choices for, because about half of the jazz musicians that I play with play it as a minor 7 and the other half play it as a dominant 7th. So you should, of course, get used to it both ways. Now, moving on to bar 10, we have the D7. That's the actual 5 chord in the key of G, and it resolves back to the 1 G7 in bar 11. Then we have those exact same 4 chords again that we played in bar 7, 8, 9, and 10, but this time they go by twice as fast, and this is of course called the turnaround, which takes us back to the beginning of the progression. There's one more chord that's often played in a jazz blues that I want you to know about, and that's the diminished 7th chord in bar 6. Now, here on the chart you can see we've added C-sharp diminished 7ths, and it's a type of substitute for the C7, and it adds a nice movement back to G7, or the 1 chord, in bar 7. Well, now that we've looked at the jazz blues in the key of G, we should now learn it in all keys. So if this is fairly new to you, you might want to take a break and work out the progression in several other keys like B flat or F, A, E flat, so on. Now a little trick I use is to use the guitar fingerboard as a sort of a slide rule to find the roots of the chords in my jazz blues. We were in the key of G, my root's right here on the low E string, 3rd fret. 4 chord would be here, 1, 4, 5. 6 would be here, and the 2. 1, 4, 5, 6, 2. 1, 4, 5, 6, or 6 is the dominant, 2. And I could just move that little shape anywhere on the fingerboard and be able to play in that key. I won't even look at the guitar, but I know that this is the 1 chord, this is the 4, this is the 5, this is the 6, and that's the 2. Key of B. Okay, and then if I use the A string as a root, as a guide, like starting right here on E flat, I can do the same thing, go up to the 4, 1, 4, or go down to this 4. I'd probably do that. 1, 4, 5, 6, and 2 in E flat. The 1 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, 6 chord, and 2 chord. Now coming up in this section, we're going to learn some useful chord voicings for our jazz blues. Now of course there are thousands of possible chords on the guitar, and you can spend the rest of your life working on them, but I want to show you some of the most useful and practical voicings that even the best players rely on every day. Now from our jazz blues progression, you know that most of the chords are dominant 7ths, so we'll spend most of our time with the dominant family. Now this consists of not only dominant 7ths, but also extended dominants like 9th chords, 11ths, and 13ths. Extensions are simply notes from the key that can be added to a 7th chord to give it color or different texture or feel. Extensions don't change the chord's function. So what we'll do is we'll go through a blues progression, maybe this time in the key of B flat, and we'll go chord by chord, and I'll show you some of the voicings you can choose from. One more quick thing. The reason to learn several voicings of a given chord is to have the ability to play melodic comp patterns. The top note of a chord is usually heard as the melody note. So by knowing several voicings with different top melody notes, an improviser can play an improvised accompaniment. And that's what comping is to play a counter melody like the bass player plays, or a piano player, for example. You just don't want to play a whole bunch of chords because it looks cool. Okay, let's learn some chords. Okay, here's the first B flat 7 chord I want you to learn. It only has 3 notes. You don't need to play big fat voicings on the guitar. You only need to play 3 or 4 note voicings. They sound the best. In fact, this 3 note one I want you to think of as your home bass dominant 7th chord for this position. We're going to learn 2 positions of dominant chords. It's got the root, the 7th, and the 3rd. Now if you're strumming chords with a pick, you're going to have to become a wizard at muting strings. I'm hitting all 6 strings, but you're still only hearing 3 because my finger's laying across the other strings, deadening it. It's a technique that just time will help you develop it. Your ear subconsciously gets tired of hearing those open strings ring, so eventually you will develop the technique to mute strings. There's our first B flat 7. It's got a 3rd on top, great chord. Here's with a 5th on top. We're just going to try to get some voicings that have various melody notes on the top so we can do melodic comping. How about the 7th on top here? And the root on top. Now I apologize because I'm having to go so fast. We don't have a lot of time and I'm going to have to burn through these chords. So if you need to stop the tape or write these out on some diagram paper or just freeze the tape on the voicing to learn them, do that. And if they're new to you, just learn a couple of these. You can always come back and learn them later. There's with the 5th on the root on top. So we got the 7th on top, 5th on top. Pretty good for this position. The next group of chords are the 9th chords. And again, I have a 3 note voicing of the 9th chord that I like. It's 1, 7, and 9. 3 notes. We're communicating the sound of a 9th chord by leaving out a bunch of notes. And you don't have to play all the theoretically correct notes, like the 5th in this case, and the 3rd. But it still sounds like a 9th chord. If you want to add a 3rd, there's a good 3rd living right here give you a little higher pitch. And if you want to go real high, you can move the root to the top like this. And there's a B flat 9 like that. Another voicing you might already know is this one. This is a B flat 9 with the inside 4 strings. You might play it like that. That's 3, 7, 9th, and 5th. You could add that root on top, or just play those notes. Pretty good for a 9th chord. I like these 3 right here. This one I showed you. Be able to play those 3 together. Real nice group. Now moving on to the next group of chords are the 11th chords. I'm going to categorize all of the dominant suspended sounding chords into one family, 11th chords. Because some of these chords aren't theoretically 11th chords, but they have that sound, that suspended 11th-y sound. This is one right here, B flat 7 suspended. I'm going to call it an 11th chord because it's the same thing basically. 1, 7, 11. Or I can keep my 5th on top, 1, 7, 11, 5. Or we can put the 7th on top, play almost what ends up being an F minor chord. The bass note here, F minor 7 over B flat. That's another 11th sound. Get the root on top if you want. The classic 5-chord suspended sound is this here. It amounts to an A flat triad over a B flat bass note. 9th suspended note there. Put the bass note on top, get a higher pitch. One other quick one I like is this one here. Very easy to play. It looks like kind of an F minor bar chord, but it's we're calling it a B flat 11th sound, and it's got the F in the bottom, the 5th, the root, the suspended note, the 11th, the 7th, and the 9th on top. I call this an invisible root chord because I'm not playing the root, but I use it to line up the chord. I can sight it. So if I want to play an E flat 11, I can see the E flat note right here, and so I can know where to put the chord. Well, now we'll go on to the 13th group, and you have to know this chord. This is the classic 13th voicing that all guitar players need to play, and it's a great sound for blues. We're going to use it all the time. 1, 7, 3. It's our little 7th chord shape with the additional 6th added on, or 13th. You can play it with the root on top right here. You can play it with the 9th on top, and if you're brave, you can reach up and get the 3rd on top. How about this one? It's like our 9th chord we just played, but we're going to add our 13 right here. Okay, now let's go to now the 4 chord in the key of B flat, which would be an E flat 7, and learn some 7th chord voicings for that real quick. Now I apologize I'm having to move so fast because I just don't have time to show you all the cool chords. Now you could for E flat just simply play all the voicings we learned for B flat slid up to the 11th fret. But it's handy to have them all in one position. So we'll take now a group of chords with the root on the 5th string. And the first one that I want you to learn is your home bass 3-note dominant chord that you're going to use all the time is right here, E flat 7. The voicing is 1, 3, and 7. Works good with this one, the B flat 7. Keeps all the notes right in the same range. If you want a higher pitch, you can add the root on top, and you can add the 5th on top. Or you can play this bar chord voicing right here, 1, 5, 7, 3, with various top notes. 5th on top, 7th on top. Okay, that's pretty good to get started for E flat 7 right there. Let's move on to the 9th chord group. Everybody knows this chord. This is the classic guitar 9th chord. You can play it as a 4-note group, just the inside 4 strings. We can go to 5 notes and play the 5th on top. And one more that I like is this one right here. I'm going to skip the D string, play the root, the 7th, the 9th, and then the 3rd on top. The same exact group of notes that we played up here. It's the same voicing, just in a different position. Now moving on to the 11th group, One of the best 11th chord sounds right here is just a simple bar chord for E flat 7. Nice chord. 1, 4 or 11, the 3rd, the 9th, and the 5th. You can add the root on top, take away the 5th and replace it with this root. It's a nice, almost piano sounding voicing. And another one that people use would be D flat triad over E flat. That makes for a good suspended sounding, 11th sounding E flat chord. Okay, and then the final group is the 13ths. You have to know this one. E flat 13. It's the same as our 9th chord with the 6th note or 13th added. And one other chord I like, voicing of a 13th in this position, is right here. Sort of a darker version. It's got the 7th in the bass, it has the 3rd, it's got the 13 here, and then a root on top. You could add a 9th on top, you could add a 5th on top. Okay, well that pretty much takes care of our 4 chord. Then the progression then moves back to B flat 7 for a couple bars, goes to the 4 chord again, and then we added that extra chord. And if we do add the extra chord, the E diminished, here's some voicings of E diminished that I like. Right here, these inside 4 strings. Now any note could be the root, so I can't tell you the scale degrees, but it's an E and then a B flat and a C sharp and a G on top. And then the same 4 notes are right here. So that's a good voicing of diminished. And I also like this one right here. The bass note with a B flat, the G here, the C sharp there, and the E on top. Remember, all these chords have 4 different names. This is either a B flat diminished, or it's a G diminished, or it's an E diminished, or it's a C sharp diminished. So you don't need to learn a bunch of voicings. All you do is slide these up. But work on the 3 together, like this. If you go to this position, then these 3 live right here. So that pretty much sets you up for life for diminished chords. Then the progression goes back to the 1 chord. Then it goes to the 6th chord, our secondary dominant 6th chord. A couple special rules about the secondary dominant 6th chord. Now I can't go into a big lecture about theory here, but certain extensions on a 6th chord don't sound so good. The secondary dominant 6th chord thinks it's going to a minor chord. It's a dominant chord resolving to minor. G7 resolving to C minor. So extensions like the natural 9 and the natural 13 sort of distract from the minor resolution. So for now, I'm going to give you a quick rule. On the secondary dominant 6th chord, just play a straight 7th chord. No 9th chords, no 13th chords. Maybe a couple 11ths, but the other ones, forget it. But there's something else you can do to this, and that is you can alter it. And what's an altered chord? Well, this is a big one in jazz, and I'm going to whiz you through a couple voicings of altered chords, or how to build your own voicings. Let's take this position that we used for E flat 7, slide it up to our 6th chord G7, play our little triad shapes, 1, 3, and 7. Now, altered chords are basically better used if you just make them up on the spot. Instead of trying to memorize a bunch of voicings, you can pretty much, because you know where the alterable notes are, you can pretty much make them up as you're going. Sound crazy? Check this out. There's the 9th right there. That's an alterable pitch. It can be raised up a half step or it can be lowered a half step. There's the 5th. It can be raised up a half step and it can be lowered a half step. You can make up any combination of those altered notes. Let me just give you a few and play along with me. Play a G7 with a raised 9th. Well, raised 9th or sharp 9. You find the 9th, you raise it up a half step. There it is. How about G7 with a flat 9? Okay, no problem. How about G7 with a raised 9 and a raised 5th? Got the raised 9 and I have my raised 5th. How about G7 with a raised 9 and a flatted 5th? Uh-oh. No problem. I don't have these memorized. You can just do it right on the spot here. Raised 5, raised 9, flat 5, flat 9, any combination. And there you go. And those chords all work well resolving to C minor, our 2 chord. Even if it's C7, it still works. One other quick position. Let's go to this G7 down here. Same thing applies. All you need to know is where the 5th and the 9th are. The 5th in this position is right here. second string, 3rd fret. The 9th is right here, the A note, 5th fret. Raise and lower them each a half step. You do it any way you want. Try these. G7 with a raised 5th. Here's the 5th, up a half step. G7 with a flatted 5th. G7 with a flatted 9th. I'm keeping the 5th intact right there on the B string. How about G7 with a raised 9th? Whoops. Now we got to reach up and get that. G7 with a sharp 5 and a raised 9. Oh. Now I am sounding like Joe Pass. G7 with a flat 5 and a flat 9. There's the 5th, there's the flatted 9th. Now we just got to get all these other notes back in place. So there you go. You can experiment on your own and work out all kinds of altered dominant 7ths. So a quick rule again, secondary dominants, only 7th chords, because the 7th chord will still sound good, or a 7th that's altered. Then the progression goes to C minor 7 or C7. You get 2 choices here. If it happens to be C minor, here's some minor voicings that sound good. C minor with the straight bar chord that you might know. I like to play C minor 11 or C minor 9. There's a lot of possible C minors, and of course you can get a chord book and learn hundreds of them. If it happens to be C7 that you decide to play as a dominant chord, all of the chords we learned for B flat 7 are the same. Just slide them up and play C11, C9, C13, any of those will work. Then the progression in the key of B flat goes to the 5 chord, F7. Now what's F7? F7 is the actual 5 chord in the key of B flat. And it's open season on the F7 chord as far as doing things to it. You can raise and lower the 9th and the 5th and play it altered, and you can play it extended. So you can play all those extended voicings, the 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths, and you can play them altered, which means you can come up with combinations like a 9th chord, F9 with a sharp 5, or F13 with a flatted 9th. Now, I know I'm going pretty quick, but that's really the bottom line. It never gets any more complicated than that. That's really how chords are built. And you can pretty much make these up on the spot. And as far as where we are in our progression, we're now resolving back to our 1 chord. Then it does the 6 again, and the 2, and the 5. Same chords over again, so nothing changes. So that pretty much takes us through the progression. And now that we've learned some chords, we better learn some rhythms now. So that's coming up next. Well, now we'll go through some rhythm patterns for a jazz blues. Now there are 2 basic rhythm feels that you should know, the swing and the shuffle. They're both pretty similar, and they're both based on the 8th note triplet. Now what's an 8th note triplet? Well, here's my little drum machine playing quarter notes. Bass drum plays 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Triplet, triplet, sounds like this. 3 counts on each beat. Triplet, triplet. Now the jazz feel is that we take away the middle note, or we tie it to the first one. Sounds like this. That sounds familiar. That's that nice, relaxed, almost shuffle feel. 1, 2, 3, triplet, trip, leaving off the middle note, or tying the first one to the second one. Now the upbeats are called ands, even though they're not true or straight 8th notes. And this allows jazz and bebop melodies to be written as even 8th notes, which is a lot easier to read. Now in the shuffle feel, the upbeats are usually really pronounced. You pretty much always hear that, especially in the drums and the bass. The swing feel is a little more subtle, and it plays down that bounce of the upbeats. Now for a guitar player, both the feels are pretty similar. And the only difference is really the style. Jazz blues shuffles tend to be more traditional, and they call for maybe a more basic rhythm part, maybe these kind of. Although there is such a thing as a jazz shuffle. And of course, a jazz feel is jazz, and it can be anything from straight ahead bebop jazz to modernistic, futuristic jazz. So now for a guitar player, playing the downbeats with a downstroke and the upbeats with an upstroke is a real natural feel. So if we play with our band here, You can almost make a circle here. Down, up, down, up, down. Get that gallop. 3, 4. Now you're not going to play anything that much. We're going to play combinations of the upstrokes and the downstrokes. But you can keep this going with your arm. It's almost like an automatic metronome. This first pattern, this first one is probably the most important one of all. And it comes from the old days of playing rhythm guitar, playing straight quarter notes. And it's not as easy as it looks. To really lay it in the groove and play it real dynamic takes a little practice. 1, 2, 3, 4. Try not to hit the upstrokes, but if you do, it's okay. And if we went through the progression, okay, so on. Now the next one I have is a little variation of that. This time we're going to play downbeat on 1, downbeat on 2, downstroke on 3, and an upstroke on the 3 and after 3. 4. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and. Now what I want you to do with all these is go through the blues progression with every one of these playing each of these patterns. Let's go on to pattern number 3. It's a variation of the one we just did. We're going to leave off 2, the count of 2. 1, 3, and to 1, 3, and. Okay, that's a good one. Work on that one for a while. And number 4 is we don't play on 1. Play on 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and. Good one. And this next one starts with an upbeat on the and that follows 1. So it's 1 and then 3 and. 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3 and 1 and 2, 3 and 1. Good one. Let's go on to another one real quick. This one kind of feels more like a shuffle because we're going to play on 1 and then and right away. 1 and we can play on 4 or we cannot play on 4. And of course you're going to want to mix these up. 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 2, 3, 4. Another quick one is to play the and of 1 and the and of 2. 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1 and 2. You can let the chords ring if you want. Cut them off. 4, 1, 4. Upstrokes for the upbeats. Okay, and just one last one here is the tricky one because we're going to have an and after the count of 4. And in chord changes, that would usually signal the next chord. So this time, we're going to play on the count of 2, 3 and then the and after 4, but we'll have a little chord change here. Let's go back and forth between G7 for a bar and C7 for a bar. Check this out. 4, 1, 2, 3, and 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and. Little push. Okay, but again, go through all the different keys of progressions, experiment with your chords, playing either one chord for a whole bar or mix up some of those chords where you play maybe a different chord on different beats and now add your rhythms to it. So things are starting to get a little complicated, but stick with me. Up next, we're going to learn some additional little concepts for comping. Okay, in this section I want to tell you about a technique that's one of the most powerful tools for an accompanist. And it's so simple, it's embarrassing, yet it took me years to figure out what people are doing when I listen to records. It's simply the moving of a chord up a half step or down a half step. You probably already do it when you play chords. You've probably been playing some funk and you... Well, that is a pretty big-time technique, especially in a jazz blues. So here's what I want you to do. We're going to go through a jazz blues in the key of G, and we're going to play straight downbeats, quarter notes. 1, 2, down, down. On the count of 4, I want you to play up a half step. I want you to take your 7th chord, in this case, G7. We're just going to go up a half step on the count of 4. In fact, right now, let's just play G7. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Or strumming. Okay? Now when we go through the progression, you're going to have to keep one thing straight, because when we change chords, we want to have that 4 be the chord we're going to. So let me go real slow and explain it. We're going to go G7, 2, 3, but now on the count of 4 we go to C sharp 7 to C7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, back to 4. Now because we're going up a half step of the chord we're going to, so we're still on G7 for 2 bars. And we're getting ready to go to C7, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Let's just leave off the diminished for now. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 4, 1, going to the E7, secondary dominant. 4, 1. I'm going to use A7. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Because now we're doing the 2 beats a piece on the turnaround. On 4, half step above the chord we're going to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Seems a little confusing. Let's play it with a track of drums and bass and just play along with me. 4, 1. Pretty good. Now you can practice that several times. And I'm just using the straight 7th chord. See how good they sound? And we'll add the extensions as we go, but just start with that basic 7th chords to get these grooves down. Now I got a little trickier one for you here. This time you're going to play on 2. You're going to do something different on the 2 besides 4. So stick with me here. This is some cool stuff. On 1 you're going to play the chord. On 2 you're going to go down a half step. Kind of sort of simulate a walking bass line. On 3, we come back to our original chord, and on 4, we do what we just did, go up a half step to the chord we're going into. Just on 2, we play this weak chord to create some movement. It gets a little tricky here. So let's play this with the track now. Here we go, same one. Now, of course, a good accompanist is never going to play the whole tune all the time like that. These are just some techniques that you play a bar or two this way, then maybe you sustain a chord for a bar and you play a little punch. It's a mixture of all these different things. But the good way to learn it is, of course, play it all the way through like we just did. So now I got one more great little trick. Now besides moving up a half step, moving down a half step, and by playing the same chord, we're going to change the melody notes on the top. This used to drive me nuts. I used to listen to Joe Pass albums, and I couldn't figure out what he was doing. It sounded like all these complex chords, and it wasn't until I finally hung out with him and saw that he just simply played a chord, up a half step, back down, with various top notes, like this. Here's a little lick for G7. Starts with a G9 that you've already learned, with the A note on top. Then we're going to go to our half step below, dominant chord. Listen to the top notes. F sharp 7, G7, G sharp 7. Now we go back to G7, this time play the D on top. Now we're going down and playing G flat 13th to continue our line going up, then G13, and then G sharp 13. You with me? Now we'll go to the G13 with the root on top. G flat 13 with the 9th on top. Pretty amazing. G sharp, and then finish off with the 13th with the 3rd on top. Listen to this. All right, so now I have a couple little tunes to teach you. These are complete 12-bar comps, and I just want you to learn them just as they're written there. And after you learn them and play with them for a while, you should be able to borrow some of the ideas in your own comping, and you're on your way. All right, this first example is in the key of B flat. It's going to utilize all the things we just did, up a half step movements, down a half step, and it also includes some of the melody movements that I just showed you from that little lick. So I'll play it with my track first, and then I'll show it to you. We'll go through it. Here we go. Okay, let's go through this chord by chord. It's all quarter notes, so it's pretty easy to play. Rhythmically, just a lot of movements with the chords. Starts with a B13 into B7, B flat 7, and then de-emphasize the A7 and the B flat 7. E13 into E flat 9, the D7 E flat. B13 takes us back to B7, and then a little movement up to the 4 chord. And then we land on the E flat 9 chord. E13, this time going to the diminished chords, B flat 13, or E diminished. Then E flat diminished to E diminished, a half step move there. A7 to B flat 7, and then we're going to do this movement that takes us down to the 6th chord with melody notes. Sharp 13 into C9, our movement. F sharp 13 into F7. Here you have to use some open strings to play the E7. That's not too bad. Then our turnaround. Same movements, again, twice as fast. Okay, now I have another little example comp, 12 bars, that also uses the same principles, a little bit different. This one's definitely inspired by Joe Pass, and it has some of the melodic movements and some punches. Just check it out. I'll play it with the track, and then I'll show it to you. All right, let's go through this thing one bar at a time. By the way, it's in the key of G, and it starts off with this A flat 9 chord with a sharp 5 on the and of 1. 1 and, like that. And we're just playing the tops of the chords. We don't have to play bass notes all the time here. It goes into this G9, C13, C sharp 13, into C7 for 2 counts, C sharp diminished, then a nice G13 that I showed you earlier. Goes up to G sharp 13, and then G13 again. This time let your finger off. It gives you what you might call a G7 sharp 5, setting up the 4 chord, which is now C7. And we're doing our 13th now with the little finger added. Back to the 13th. Now a descending movement with the lines going in opposite directions. Same thing again. And this is just sort of a weird way to play E7 sharp 9. So you get that nice movement. Then we're going to our 2 chord, A minor, with some setup chords, A minor, B flat 13, and then you might call this A9 with a sharp 5 to D9, a D7 sharp 5, just a little low chord to help make a melody, and then a C over D, G diminished, G13. Then a nice turnaround with some flat 5 substitutes. This instead of E7, now we're going to play B flat 9, then A minor 11. If you want to get the bass note, you can. You don't have to. And then this cool chord, a version of D7. It's got the 3rd and the 7th, but then it's got a flat 9 and a sharp 5. That's why we're calling it D7 sharp 5 flat 9. Okay, now coming up in this section, we're going to talk about chord movements. Now, what's a chord movement? Well, a chord movement is a phrase of chords. Just like you probably learned some single note melodies or licks, playing maybe blues or rock or something, you can do the same thing with chords. And some of the great chord melody players have worked out phrases of chords for various progressions, like 2-5-1s and 1-6-2-5. And I want to show you some really nice little simple phrases. These ones only have 4 chords in them that you can superimpose inside your blues progression. And they're all going to be for dominant chords, so every time you have a dominant chord, you can play one of these 5 movements we're about to learn. Our first one is going to be for G7, and it goes like this. It's a G7 3-note chord, just like we first learned, an A minor shape, a B flat diminished, and then this little G triad. It's really just G major. You can play them all as quarter notes, and you can play them forwards or backwards. Now that one sounds like the old rhythm days back in the 40s with the rhythm guitar players. And they create sort of this movement low, in this case, like a bass. And it can sort of harmonize with the bass parts. But they're also very contemporary. I have a lot of success with these playing funk and fusion music in my comping. And I use them, of course, in chord melody playing. So there's your first one. Why don't you work on that one? And we'll go on to this next one for a C7 chord. This starts with our simple C7 voicing here. Pay attention to the top notes. That's the melody. Second chord is like a C11, a C diminished, and C7. We're not playing an altered situation, so this could be played in a static 1-chord vamp or in a blues. A lot of situations. Our first one. So now you can take the first one, move it up here to C7, and you have this one down here. So now you have 2 for C7. Here's a third one for C7. We start where we left off in the last one, 3rd on top. Go to play C7, only the inside 4 strings. D minor 7, D sharp or E flat diminished, and then you end on this is actually a C7 voicing that goes 7, 3, root, 5th on top. If that one's a little bit of a stretch, play a C9. They both sound fine, and you just go backwards the same way. Connect the second one and the third one together. Pretty soon you get some nice melodic movement. And you don't have to think of these as 4 individual chords. It's just a little phrase of chords you memorize away from the tune, then bring it back into the song, and it gives you a lot of motion. Here's another variation of the upper strings. This one has the root on top for G7 or G13. Go G13 to like a G11, the diminished chord, B flat diminished. And this is a G7 voicing right here. 1, 5, 7, 3. So how do you use those things? Well, one thing you can do is just I'll play through a whole blues progression with my drum machine here, just using those. Of those, what did we learn? 4 of them? Okay. Key of G, 2, 3, 4. I'm bored, go backwards. Backwards. The E7, secondary dominant. You can play it for that one. 2 chord. Turn around, you don't have enough time unless you're really fast. Just play the chords in your half step. Or different phrasing. Okay, let me show you actually a couple more movements. These are a lot like what a piano player might play in their left hand. They're little low voicings, similar to the first ones we did of dominant chords. This first one's in A7, so let's think up into A. We have our first movement here, but now we can add this new one to that one, and it's an A7 voicing with a 3rd in the bottom, 7th, and the root right here. A little unusual, but just learn this. A7, A9, A flat 7, sliding into A7. So we get that melody. Nice movement. Connected to the second one. Cool, okay. Here's a little variation of that now for D7. Little lower voicing. This is a D7 chord with the 7th in the bass, 3rd, and then the 5th on the top. See that? And this movement kind of goes with this chord. I'm just going to lay my finger down and go. And add this final D note on. Now you can connect those 3 together, and you get a pretty long line now, right? You just have to work out the rhythmical phrasing of how you would use that. Okay, now I have a little piece to show you that features the first chord movements that we learned. It also sort of is an example of punches, like a horn section would play. So you kind of learn a bunch of things out of this little piece. A 12-bar comp example in the key of G, and I'll play it first, then we'll go through it. Okay, let's go through this thing one chord at a time. It starts on a pickup bar, actually on the downbeat of 2, 2 with a C over D chord, the 5 chord, and a diminished chord on 3, and then the and of 4, G13. Like imagine a horn section. Ba, ba, da, ba. Then play the chord movement underneath it kind of soft. Do it again. Moving to the 4 chord, we play G13, G7 sharp 5, C9, and movement number 2. Back to the G13 in our first movement. Then to the secondary dominant 6 chord, A minor 7, then the second movement again in D this time. Then our little punch again. And then it sets itself up back to the beginning. So why don't we play it together here with our band. Remember, on the count of 2, play your little horn section pickups. 2, 3, 4, 1. Turn around. Let's change the subject a little bit and move into a shuffle feel. Now, certainly along the line somewhere, even in a jazz situation, you're going to be asked to play a rock and rolly shuffle in a jazz blues. So we want to talk about some of the feels. I got a great little comp pattern to show you, but first I want to talk a little bit about the picking. If you're using a pick in strumming, that's fine. You might want to use a little lighter pick so you don't have too much attack. So you can play light. I am one of the unusual players that plays with no pick when I comp. I usually put the pick in my mouth, and I play with just my thumb and fingers, kind of like a bad flamenco guitar player. It's just a habit I've developed, so if you see me doing that, don't worry about it. It can still be done with a pick. I got a challenge for you, though. Most of the comps that we've talked about are all based on the eighth note, the triplet eighth note feel, either downstrokes or upstrokes. You can move to another level, a little more advanced level of comping if you incorporate the complete triplet. And the challenge is to play, I'm going to use my fingers now, to play a complete triplet with your right hand. Baku, baku, baku. Now listen to that with the drums here. On an A7 chord. 3, 4. Anyway, you get the idea. And you just have to sort of play around with that. Maybe a combination of eighth notes and triplets. That's what I was doing. So forth. Okay, here we got a little tune now that says shuffle comp in the key of A. And I'll play it with the track first, and I'm going to show it to you. Here we go. Okay, let's go through this thing one chord at a time. Starts on the and of 1 with a bass note. You don't have to hit the bass note, but it's nice. And plays these real great traditional movement of chords using a 6 chord sliding down a whole step You hear everybody from B.B. King to John McLaughlin using that movement. It's an A6 to a G6, but when it's G6, it's really could be called A9. D over A and A7. Now you could do this little hammer if you like. These are just little triad chords with various bass notes. I just put in for effect. We've done this a lot of times today. E flat 13 going to D9, which sets up our 4 chord. Now we do the same thing up here in E flat, in D. Little diminished movement back to A13, and the movement again, and a little walk down to F sharp 7, our secondary chord. Now I'm playing an F sharp 7 with a raised 5, but you could play it with a standard 5th too. And then a little walk up diatonically, B minor, C sharp minor, D major 7, E minor 7 flat 5, half step into the B minor 9, and then this D over E, A13. Then our turnaround, just some nice chords here. F sharp chord, B minor 9, and E7. Okay, let's play it along with our little drum track here. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I wish we had a little more time to spend on minor blues, but I'm going to have to keep it kind of short. So what we're going to do is play through a minor blues in the key of C. Now, a minor blues is exactly like a major blues as far as the feel, the use of chord movements, half-step connection. All these things are the same. You're just using lots of minor chords, minor 2, 5, 1. So if you get the principles of the major blues, you can certainly apply it to minor. So let's play through this C minor progression. What I have is 3 different versions. The first one is what I would consider the basic changes for a minor blues in C minor. Second one has a few additional chords. Third one, some more chords than that. So play along with me, and we'll just play with the drums here and get a feel for some minor blues. Here we go. All right, it's your turn to play. We're going to get the band back up here, and we're going to play a few different jazz blues progressions in a few different keys. And I think I'll just play some melodies in some soloing over the top, and so you should practice applying some of the ideas we've talked about in the video. So just have a good time with it, play it over and over again, and then of course get out there and play with your friends, play with some musicians, and start applying this stuff. So have a good time.
Well, all right, that's all the time we have, and I really want to thank you for checking out this video and hope you found some ideas that you can use. You know, the best way to get these things under your fingers is to put them to use as soon as possible. Try to get together with some other players or your friends and just play. Now, if you can't do that, get some play-along tapes or a drum machine or even a simple metronome. Now also, you really need to listen to as many recordings as you can of this style to get a true feel for it. Besides guitar players, listen to piano players for the way they use chords and textures, and listen to drummers for the rhythm accent ideas they use. And of course, check out bass players to learn more about walking bass lines. And remember, to be a good accompanist, you must listen carefully to the other players in the band, especially the soloist. You also need to develop the skill to know when and when not to play and how to support, enhance the music, not distract from it. I want to thank the musicians that played with me here, John Bishop on drums and Rick Hool on bass, and to all the crew here at American and Warner Brothers. Thank you guys, and we'll see you later.